You have already reached the most far-ranging nerve in your body today, without meaning to and without noticing. It happened when you sighed after the difficult phone call, that long exhale which arrived on its own and left your shoulders sitting lower than it found them. It happened again if your hand drifted to the hollow at the back of your neck during a hard moment, and again if you hummed to yourself while the kettle heated. Each of those small instinctive gestures pressed on a different doorway into a single nerve, the one that sets the resting pace of your heart, the speed of your digestion, and the background tone of your whole nervous system. Anatomists named it the vagus, from the Latin word for wanderer, a root it shares with vagrant and vagabond, because it leaves the brainstem and wanders down through the neck, the chest, and the belly, touching nearly every organ along the way. Yet the wanderer can be reached from outside. 5 locations on your body access it through 5 different sensory inputs. Each location sends signals to the same processing station in the brainstem. The working picture is 5 doors set into different walls of one building, each cut for a different key, a rhythm, a pressure, a touch, a position, a vibration. Every key has a different shape, and every door opens into one room. Your body has been opening some of these doors on instinct since long before it learned to speak. The sigh, the hand, and the hum were 3 of them working exactly as built. Where each door sits, what shape of key it takes, and why the room answers the way it does, that is the map. And the map begins inside the room itself. Deep in your brainstem, at the level where your skull settles onto your spine, sits a slender column of nerve tissue where nearly everything your body reports about its own interior lands first. The stretch of your stomach after lunch, the oxygen dissolved in your blood, the pressure inside your arteries, the state of your gut lining, all of it arrives at this one column before it reaches anywhere else. Anatomists call the column the nucleus of the solitary tract. The solitary nucleus will do. Its address matters. The column sits in the oldest part of the brain, the machinery that runs whether you are awake, asleep, or under anesthetic, which means the readings it takes and the adjustments it makes happen below opinion, below mood, below anything you would call deciding, and the direction of the traffic feeding it is the map's first surprise. Roughly 4/5 of the fibers in the vagus carry information toward the brain, a proportion mapped by Berthoud and Neuhuber in the journal Autonomic Neuroscience, which means the nerve most of us picture as a command cable running orders downward is, by fiber count, overwhelmingly a listening cable running news upward. The solitary nucleus is where the news is read. How it reads is the part that matters for everything ahead. The nucleus responds to patterns far more than to any single signal. The way you can judge the mood of a household from the rhythm of footsteps in a hallway. One heavy step means little, while slow, even, unhurried steps sustained for minutes mean the house is calm. When the incoming pattern reads as steady, unforced, and sustained, the nucleus tilts your autonomic balance toward its settling half. The parasympathetic side, the half that slows the heart, deepens digestion, and eases the grip of vigilance. That tilt leaves a measurable trace called heart rate variability, the natural variation in spacing from one heartbeat to the next. And the trace is simple to interpret. When the settling half gains ground, the spacing widens and turns supple, so the room reads patterns, and patterns can be composed. One consequence of that basement address deserves a moment of its own. Words carry no weight down there. You can tell yourself to calm down, and the sentence stays upstairs in the cortex, in the part of you that speaks, while the column below runs on physical evidence only, stretch, pressure, rhythm, delivered through nerves. Which is why an instruction to relax so rarely works, and a single slow breath so often does. The breath is admissible evidence. The sentence is hearsay. One more feature of the room matters before the first door. It was wired from the start for more than one sender, alongside vagal traffic. The column takes deliveries from the glossopharyngeal nerve, the neighbor that monitors blood chemistry at the arteries of your neck, so the architecture has always accepted mail from more than one carrier. That detail returns when door 4 arrives. For the moment, the first door is hiding inside something you have done more than 20,000 times since yesterday morning. Which of the body's automatic processes hands you its own keys? Now, of all the streams pouring into the solitary nucleus, one is unlike every other, because you can take its wheel at will. Your heartbeat ignores instruction, and your blood pressure ignores instruction. Yet your breath obeys the moment you attend to it, and then runs faultlessly all night once you stop. Breathing is the one autonomic process built with a manual override, and the override is door 1. Inside the walls of your airways and lungs sit stretch sensors that fire as the tissue expands, and their oldest known job is ending each breath on time. When the lungs stretch far enough, the sensors signal the brainstem by way of the vagus, and the inhale shuts off. Physiologists call the arrangement the herring-broyer reflex, and it has ended every breath you have ever taken. There is a second piece of wiring here that explains why the exhale specifically is the key. Your heartbeat quickens slightly on every inhale and slows slightly on every exhale, a coupling physicians call respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and the slowing side of that cycle is driven by the vagus itself. A breath weighted toward the outbreath therefore spends more of each cycle on the slowing side. Layered onto the pressure story, the picture completes when the outbreath runs slow, pressure inside the chest stays low for longer, and the pressure sensors seated in the great vessels near your heart, the baroreceptors, report the easing upward through the vagal stream. Breathing that settles near 5 to 7 breaths in a minute, with the exhale stretched past the inhale, produces precisely the input the solitary nucleus reads as an all-clear, rhythmic, sustained, unforced. The spacing between heartbeats begins widening within a minute or two of the rhythm taking hold. People keep rediscovering this rhythm without the anatomy too. Spoken prayer cycles, chanted mantras, the counted breathing taught in evening wind-down routines, timed against a clock. Practices from unrelated centuries and continents keep drifting toward the same handful of breaths per minute, converging on a number none of them could have named. The sigh after the phone call was this door swinging open on instinct, one oversized exhale interrupting the pattern the nucleus had been reading all afternoon. Your body even schedules smaller versions on its own. Spontaneous sighs surface every few minutes around the clock, quietly reopening the deflated air sacs of the lungs, maintenance you never notice performing. But door 1 has a limit, the body solved with a second entrance. The respiratory key turns only while your attention holds it, and the moment your mind moves on, the breath drifts back to its shallow automatic setting. So the body keeps a heavier key on the ring, one that works through sheer mass and pressure. What presses on the nerve when a breath goes deep instead of long? Well, the answer is the broadest muscle you own that you have likely never felt directly. Your diaphragm is a dome of muscle roughly the size of a dinner plate, drawn across the bottom of the rib cage, dropping with every inhale and rising with every exhale, and everything below it rides that motion. The liver and stomach and coils of intestines sliding and settling like cargo beneath a moving deck. Most adult breathing barely moves the deck at all. Hours at a desk, a waistband, the habit of holding the belly in, all of it trains the breath upward into the chest, where the dome's travel shrinks to a fraction of its range. When a breath drops deep and low instead, the belly rising while the chest stays quiet, the dome's travel roughly doubles, and the pressure inside your abdomen swings by somewhere between 5 and 20 centimeters of water on each cycle. The unit is worth picturing. Enough pressure to lift a column of water the length of your hand, applied softly to everything in the belly, once every few seconds, while the breathing lasts. Down there, the body is wired to notice. The walls of the esophagus and stomach carry vagal sensors tuned to stretch and squeeze. The membrane lining the abdominal cavity carries more, and each slow pressure wave from the descending dome works those sensors in rhythm. Their reports climb the vagus to the solitary nucleus as a second stream, mechanical where the first was respiratory, which means one deep breath writes the calm message through 2 doors at once. You have felt these particular sensors at work your whole life, by the way, in a different costume. They are the ones that report a full stomach after a large meal, and their steady firing is part of why the body downshifts so insistently toward rest and digestion once the plates are cleared. Tucked in here is one more mechanical detail, easy to miss and hard to forget. The vagus itself passes through the diaphragm. Its 2 main trunks travel down along the esophagus and thread through the dome's own opening on their way to the stomach, so every deep breath does more than press on distant sensors. The muscle physically rises and falls around the nerve it is signaling through. That identical motion of the dome also happens to pump lymphatic fluid up through your chest. Quiet work in a separate plumbing system entirely. On this map, what matters is the pressure sensors and where their message lands. 2 doors then, and both ride on breath. One of the doors is on the outside of the building. Everywhere else in the body, the vagus runs deep, buried under muscle and bone where no touch can reach it. It keeps exactly one outpost at the surface. Near the base of the skull, a small branch peels away from the main trunk, threads through the temporal bone, and surfaces at your outer ear, where it supplies the skin of a small ridged shelf of cartilage sitting just above the entrance to the ear canal. The hollow a fingertip settles into naturally, below the upper folds. Anatomy atlases label the shelf. The Simba concha. The branch is the auricular branch of the vagus, the ear branch from here on. Its territory was pinned down dissection by dissection, patch of skin by patch of skin, in work traced by Pucher and Filler in the journal Clinical Anatomy, and it's settled where the wanderer touches the surface, reliably in that hollow, variably in a few neighboring folds, and nowhere else on the body. Out of roughly 2 square meters of skin wrapping you, the vagus listens through about a thumbnail's worth. Why there, of all places? Because the outer ear is a seam. In the embryo, the tissues that fold together to form it come from territories claimed by several different nerves, and when the folding finishes, the finished ear carries wiring from all of them, trigeminal toward the front, cervical nerves behind, and the vagus holding that one small shelf in the middle. Your ear is a map of old borders, and one province still answers to the wanderer. Gentle circular pressure on that shelf travels as vagal traffic, the third shape of key, cut from touch. Something changed for me the first time I saw that hollow shaded in on an anatomical plate. Within a week, a fingertip had found its way there during a long hold on the phone, and the habit has kept itself since. 3 doors are now on the map, and what they share sits in plain view: rhythm from the lungs, pressure from the belly, touch at the ear. 3 streams converging on one reading room in the brainstem. From here the map turns stranger. Ahead sits the question of what happens when medicine knocks on the ear door deliberately, then a door that belongs to a different nerve entirely and still opens into that one room, and finally a door the nerve knocks on from the inside. And then medicine found the ear door for itself. Clinics had known about the outpost the hard way for over a century, as an oddity of the examination room and a portion of people touching the deeper vagal territory of the ear canal with a cotton swab triggers an immediate cough because the brainstem misreads the touch as something brushing the airway, the vagus's home turf. Skin contact, airway reflex, the wiring gives itself away and ear specialists learn to work around it. Meanwhile, surgeons had long implanted electrodes directly onto the vagus in the neck, a treatment used for stubborn epilepsy and studied for depression, and it works well enough that researchers eventually asked the obvious question: if the nerve surfaces at the skin of the ear, could the electrode sit on the skin instead of under it? A research field grew out of that question, delivering mild electrical pulses through the surface of the ear hollow, with no incision anywhere, and measuring what the body does in response. Under that stimulation, the spacing between heartbeats widened, and circulating markers of inflammation shifted alongside it, effects measured by Bedran and colleagues in the journal Brain Stimulation. Brain scans from the same research field show the solitary nucleus lighting up when the hollow is stimulated and staying quiet when the pulses move to the earlobe, a patch served by ordinary cervical skin nerves, which is exactly why trials use the earlobe as their placebo site. The door is that specific. A centimeter away, the key stops turning. Beyond the clinic, the ear door settles something the other doors leave blurry. A slow breath changes pressures, gases, and reflexes all over the torso, so its calming effect could in principle arrive by several roads at once. A light touch on a patch of cartilage changes almost nothing else in the body. If that alone widens the spacing between heartbeats, the listening cable is doing the work by itself. Signal in, tilt out, with no mechanical accomplices. As proofs of the map go, the smallest door is the cleanest one. Worth saying plainly, too, is what the tilt feels like from the inside, because it is easy to expect fireworks and miss the real thing. A widened heartbeat spacing has no sensation of its own. What registers, when it registers at all, is subtraction. The jaw unclenching a degree. The breath arriving lower. The sense of a room becoming slightly quieter without a single sound changing. What remains unsettled is the recipe. The anatomy is established and the effect's direction is documented in clinical trials, while the ideal pressure, rhythm, and duration for a bare fingertip rather than an electrode are still being worked out, so anyone claiming a proven finger protocol is running ahead of the evidence. What is already true is the accessibility. Because of the 5 doors, this one asks the least. one hand, a few unhurried minutes, in a meeting, in a waiting room, or lying awake at 3 in the morning with nobody around you able to tell that anything is happening at all. Door 4 is the strangest entry on the map, because it opens the room without involving the vagus at all. How does a signal reach the vagus's reading room, traveling on a different nerve? Now the place your hand drifted during that hard moment sits at the hollow where skull meets spine, and packed into that half-inch are the densest muscle-measuring instruments you own. The small sub-occipital muscles there carry on the order of 36 spindles per gram of tissue, spindles being the sensors that report a muscle's length and position moment, a density dozens of times beyond the big muscles of the hip. The patch is built that way because it steers the platform your eyes and inner ear ride on, and a platform that precise demands constant measurement. When the instinctive version of the gesture appears, it has a shape, the palm cups the curve, the fingers settle into the hollow, the head tips back a few degrees into the support. Weight comes off the smallest, busiest muscles in the body, and the flood of signals they send changes character, from strain readings to the steady, low-level report of tissue at rest under warm, familiar pressure. Your own hand has a signature in that report, its warmth, its steadiness, the fact that its pressure arrives exactly when expected, because you are the one applying it. All of that reads as the opposite of threat, a long, steady clause of the physical evidence the column runs on, delivered at the most heavily monitored location the body owns. Sustained, gentle contact there matters because of where that flood travels, and here is the twist. Those signals ride cervical spinal nerves, neighbors of the wanderer with their own separate entrance into the brainstem, and part of their traffic still terminates at the solitary nucleus. This is the glossopharyngeal arrangement from the beginning paying off. The room accepting mail from a second carrier was the design all along, and the neck uses that loading dock. The nucleus takes the pattern, steady pressure at a trusted location, the head supported, the platform quiet, and files it with everything else that says the household is calm. The deeper physics of that half-inch, including the strand of tissue tying those muscles to the membrane around the brain, has had its own full telling in this playlist. On the map it stands as door 4, the position entrance. Your hand knew the address before you did. 4 doors, 4 shapes of key, and every key so far has come from outside the nerve, air, pressure, touch, position. The 5th key is different in kind because the vagus manufactures it. What does it sound like when a nerve knocks on its own door? Well, the wanderer's path down the neck contains one branch that behaves oddly. It dives past the voice box, loops underneath a major artery in the chest, and climbs all the way back up to enter the larynx from below. Anatomists call it the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Recurrent because it doubles back on itself, and it is the vagus's own motor line to your vocal cords. Every word you have spoken today, every note you have hummed, was the vagus driving muscle. Ordinary speech gives the nucleus little to hold on to. Talking is a chopped, irregular vagal output, bursts and stops shaped by grammar rather than by rhythm. Humming turns that motor line into a sustained event. A low note behind closed lips sets the vocal cords vibrating somewhere between 100 and 200 times each second, driven continuously by vagal output, and the vibration spreads through the cartilage of the throat, the bones of the skull, and the tissues surrounding the ear. A hum also carries a passenger. Sound only happens on the way out. So a held note is, by necessity, a long, slow exhale, which means the 5th door quietly turns the 1st key at once. 2 doors with 1 note, stranger still, the very tissue producing the buzz is wired to feel it. The larynx carries its own vagal sensory endings that register the vibration as it happens, and the ear branch, door 3, sits in territory that hums along with every note. Motor signal leaves through the vagus, becomes vibration, and re-enters as sensation through vagal listening lines. Each piece of that circuit is established anatomy on its own. Reading the pieces together as a loop, the nerve composing a physical signal that its own sensory side then delivers to the solitary nucleus is an assembly this map proposes rather than a finding any single laboratory has certified. It would account for something people have done unprompted for as long as there have been kitchens and cradles, the absent-minded hum that arrives in moments of settling, and the humming, chanting, and lullaby traditions that every culture on record seems to have built without consulting the others. Scaled up, the note keeps its physics, A choir holding a long phrase is a room full of vagus nerves driving vocal cords on one shared exhale. Every singer's breathing locked to a single score, the rhythm door and the vibration door opening together in 40 chests at once. A lullaby, seen this way, works on both of its ends at once. The singer's fifth door is open. Vibration and long exhale together, while the infant held against the chest receives the buzz a second way entirely, conducted through ribs and arms into small bones and skin, a calm signal transmitted by direct contact from one nervous system into another. The oldest soothing technology on Earth is a vagal broadcast with a range of half a meter. These days the hum at my own stove is deliberate, the tune my grandmother kept, and I file it under maintenance rather than mood. The nerve can hear itself. And then, with the fifth door drawn, the whole page comes into focus, and the assembled picture shows what no single door could. Counted with the two breath doors standing as one family, the shapes of key come to fore. Breath signals in rhythm and pressure, a touch on the ear's one listening patch, a position flood from the most sensor-dense half-inch you own, and a vibration the nerve generates for itself in the throat. Separate carriers bring them in, some vagal and some cervical, and one station in the brainstem reads them all, making the tilt it was built to make whenever the pattern says calm. Corridors, though, run deeper into the building than mood and heartbeat. Vagal signaling also reigns in the body's production of inflammatory molecules, a braking circuit demonstrated in animal experiments by Tracy and colleagues published in Nature, where stimulating the nerve dialed down one of the immune system's loudest chemical messengers, and human trials have pursued that circuit since. A calm reading in that column becomes, downstream, a quieter inflammatory tone as well. There's an engineering logic to the whole arrangement worth saying aloud, offered as a reading rather than a certainty. Alarm needs no manual entrance. A single fright can raise your heart rate in under a second, unbidden. Settling is the direction the body cannot force from the top down, so it left handles on the outside, 5 of them, in different materials, reachable by different means, so that a body under strain always has at least one within reach. The tilt each door produces runs on the time scale of minutes. It builds across the first minutes of input and fades not long after the input ends, which is exactly what a balance adjusting system should do. These are maintenance handles, small and repeatable, and their value sits in how often life puts one within reach. A person mid-conversation can lengthen an exhale. A person lying awake can rest a finger on an ear. A person holding back tears can cup the top of the neck, and a person alone in a kitchen can hum. What changes, once the page is complete, is how the scattered advice of a lifetime reads. Breathe deeply, they said, and hum a little tune, and mind how you carry your head. And each instruction floated free, folk wisdom without a skeleton. On the finished map they stop floating. They become entries in one system, 5 keys on one ring, and the reason any of them ever worked is the reason all of them work. One pattern reading column, one tilt of a balance. If several of these doors felt familiar as they went onto the page, that is because your life installed the habits long before any anatomy explained them. The gestures you have made in moments of stress all these years were your body operating its own console, precisely and unschooled. The map was never secret. A quiet dignity sits in how ordinary the equipment turned out to be. Every tool on this map came issued at birth, a breath, a hand, a note held behind closed lips, and in all the years since, the hardware has never once needed an upgrade. Medicine, arriving much later with its electrodes and its trials, has mostly been confirming the placement of doors the body hung long ago. Somewhere in the years before language, bodies were already sighing after fright, hands were already cradling the base of the skull, and voices were already humming infants toward sleep. Folklore and physiology have been describing one architecture from 2 directions, and the architecture stood there the whole time, waiting for the descriptions to meet. They meet in a slender column in the brainstem that reads the pattern of everything you do gently to yourself. The nerve that wanders from the brainstem to the gut can be reached from the lungs, the belly, the ear, the skull, and the throat. The body built every entrance. You only needed to know where they were.